So we will go ahead and get started. I want to take a moment to introduce our two presenters today. Brittany Shorey is the Health and Human Sciences educator in LaGrange County, and Kidani Sarko is the Health and Human Sciences educator in Allen County. If you have questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to use the chat box, and we will address those questions at the end. So Brittany, I'm going to hand it on over to you.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so goals. What are goals? They can be goods, money, activities, or something even less tangible for that matter. Something you want to work towards or want to achieve. So think about something that you accomplished in 2020. As crazy as 2020 was, we all accomplished something successfully. Goals are developed from values, and they can change based on where you're at and what life throws at you. 2020 is another great example. Maybe some of you have tried to achieve something in 2020, but maybe obviously the pandemic has changed or altered those goals. Doesn't mean you failed at them, it just changed. Next slide, please. So goals, why do we want to set them? Research shows that people who set goals and work towards them are happier and feel more successful long term. Setting goals can help gain a sense of balance, direction, purpose, feeling of success, and insight into our failures or where do we want to improve in life. Next slide, please. So identifying priorities and recognizing values is something we really want to focus on when we first identify what we want to achieve in goal setting. So these first steps in setting those goals is identifying priorities and recognizing what our values are. So what is important to you in life? That's something to ask yourself when you're setting a goal. Your health, your family, your religion, maybe your career or your profession. Knowing what's important to you is going to really help you identify your goal, and you will be way more successful in accomplishing these goals. Next slide, please. So how do we set realistic goals and expectations for ourselves? I recommend assessing your values. What are they? Values guide your day-to-day way of feeling, thinking, and your behavior. So again, recognizing what's important to you and where your priorities are falling at that point in time. So what expectations do you have yourself? I think that's really important to remember because you don't want to set that expectation too high and then gain a sense of failure, because if you set something realistic, then you can change it or alter it. And maybe it's too easy, and then you can go back and reassess that goal. So rather than feeling a gain of uncomfortability with failure, you can go back to your goal and reset it, essentially. So that's really important, setting a realistic expectation for yourself when setting a goal. Next slide, please. Short-term goals, intermediate goals, and long-term goals. These are three different things that we need to look at when setting goals. So what time frame are you looking at as far as setting your goal? Do you want it to be short-term, which can be in hours or days? Intermediate, so potentially maybe 6 months from now? Or is it going to be a long-term goal? So maybe in a lifetime or a year, for example. Next slide, please. There are quite a few different strategies for goal setting, and I want to remind everybody that we are all different and not one strategy is going to work for everyone. So again, not a one-size-fits-all strategy for goal setting. It can be very difficult, and most of us are not used to thinking very specific and measurable. But when we set goals, it's really important to be as specific as possible. A key element in managing goals is designing a strategy for reaching them. So when we think about goals and setting them, think about the acronym of SMART, S-M-A-R-T. Next slide, please. So some examples of goals that maybe some of us may be might be setting in 2021 or maybe previous years. So I'm gonna lose weight. I'm gonna get organized. I'm gonna eat healthier. I'm gonna drink more water. I'm gonna be more involved in the community. These are great goals to set for yourself, but they're not necessarily smart. So how much weight are you going to lose over what time frame, and how are you going to do it? So again, being as specific as possible when setting your goals, because you're leaving yourself more accountable and you're giving yourself more body or weight to those goals and how you're going to be successful. Next slide, please. So when I do presentations, I like to think of myself and when I have set goals for myself, and I like to be more realistic with everyone as far as things that I have set and achieved myself. So in 2020, I set quite a few goals, and I will be completely honest, I did not achieve some of them, probably half of them, and that's okay. I changed them, and then I did accomplish them, but I didn't initially reach them the first time I set them. So it's okay to go back and alter your goals, and then you can be more successful. Obviously, the pandemic was very challenging for most of us, and that was the reasoning behind altering those goals, and that's okay to do that. So for example, graduating college, that can be a SMART goal. Saving money each month to purchase a house, and that is my house, and that is me graduating from college with my older brother. Running a race during a pandemic, that's also me in the blue shirt in the middle. So again, being personal through this. So for example, making that SMART goal each month, putting money toward paychecks, being specific on the amount, for example, $400 from each paycheck. Putting it aside in a separate account possibly, or wherever you're gonna hold your money in a credit union or a bank. And you're going to put it aside and not touch it for so many months to save up for a house. Again, you might not know when that house is gonna pop up, but if you consistently make that goal and you can save $400 each month from that paycheck, you can make that goal SMART. So again, being as specific as you possibly can is gonna make you more accountable and achievable in that goal. Next slide, please. I'm going to now introduce Kidani, and he is going to talk about forming habits and change and how we do that.
Thank you, Brittany. Yes, so when we think about habits, what is habit? Habit is unconscious behavior that we acquired through frequent repetition. Then how do we develop habits? Or how do we avoid habits that we don't want to have? So it could be both ways, either getting a new habit or avoiding a habit that we don't want anymore, or habits that are not good for us. So habit formation is a process. It takes time. It requires repetition until it becomes natural. Let's do an activity. Please cross your arms. Cross your arms. Keep it crossed. Now, change the other way. Cross your arms the other way. Do it with me, please. Okay? So, how did it feel when you were asked to cross your arms the other way? Did it come naturally, or did you have to stop and think about it? Were you comfortable with doing this differently from your normal process? What are something that makes people resistant to change? Just question to think about. What can you do to make it easier for you to accept changes? It takes time. It takes repetition. For example, let me give a personal example. When we have COVID at the beginning, and when society started wearing face masks, it was not easy for me. You know, I would forget, like, then I remember when I see face mask is required to enter the building, then I have to go back and find one. Well, not anymore. Now, I don't even have to think about it. I have always one on my face when I'm with people or outside, or I have one in my car. Like we have our purse with us, like we have my wallet. It's always on my pocket. So through repetition, it becomes natural. Next slide, please. Now let's watch this video.
Imagine for a moment that you have a habit that you really want to change. Let's say, for instance, you go up to the cafeteria every afternoon and you eat a chocolate chip cookie. This habit has caused you to gain a little bit of weight. In fact, this habit has caused you to gain exactly 8 pounds, and your wife has started making some pointed comments. And when I say you, what I really mean is me, because this is a habit that I had that I just couldn't kick. To understand why that habit was so powerful and what it would take to change it, I had to learn how habits work. Every habit functions the same way. At first, there's a cue, some type of trigger that makes the behavior unfold automatically. Studies tell us that a cue can be a location, a time of day, a certain emotional state, other people, or just a pattern of behaviors that consistently triggers a certain routine. To figure out the cue for my craving, I spent a few days tracking exactly when the urge to eat a cookie hit. And what I noticed pretty soon was something interesting. The cookie craving always hit about between 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the afternoon. That was my cue. It was a certain time of day. The next part in the habit loop is the routine, the behavior itself. And for me, that was pretty easy to figure out. Every day between 3 and 3:30, I'd get this craving for a cookie. I'd get up out of my chair. I'd walk over to the elevator. I'd take the elevator up to the 14th floor. I'd get out. I'd buy a cookie, and then I would eat it while talking to my colleagues in the cafeteria. The last part of the habit loop is the reward. And in some respects, the reward is the most important part because that's why habits exist, so that we can get the rewards that we want. But figuring out a reward is kind of tricky. To figure out what reward was driving my habit, I did a little bit of an experiment. One day when the cookie urge struck, instead of going up to the cafeteria, I went outside and I took a walk around the block. Then the next day, I went up to the cafeteria, but instead of buying a cookie, I got a candy bar and then ate it at my desk. And then the day after that, I went up to the cafeteria again, but I didn't buy anything. Instead, I just talked to friends for about 10 minutes. You get the idea. What I was trying to do was test different hypotheses to figure out what reward I was actually craving. And what I figured out pretty quickly was it had nothing to do with cookies. It had to do with socializing. Nowadays what happens is at about 3:30 in the afternoon, I absentmindedly stand up, I look around the office, I see a friend, I'll walk over and we'll gossip for 10 minutes and then I'll go back to my desk. The urge to go get a cookie has completely disappeared. The new behavior has become a habit, and I've lost about 12 pounds as a result. Studies have shown that if you can diagnose your habits, you can change them in whichever way you want. So what are the cues, routines, and rewards in your life? What habit do you want to change? The power of habit. Why we do what we do in life and business. Learn more at thepowerofhabit.com.
So from this video, as we can see, there are 3 main components for habit formation: cue, routine, and rewards. For example, I mentioned wearing a face mask. You know, that in the habit loop, cue, routine, and reward, for me now wearing a face mask, the reward could be the positive feeling that I will stay safe, or it could be that I will keep my friends and family safe, or it could be the reward that I won't have to go back from entering the store, wherever that may be, the building. So those are important to think about for the habits we want to develop or for the habit we want to change. Things to think about. What is one goal you would like to achieve? What is one simple action that you can do daily that will get you closer towards achieving your goal? When we have a goal, like Brittany mentioned in the SMART goals, SMART, it has to be specific, not vague. How can you measure it? When and where are you going to do your chosen action? Consistency is important. Every time you encounter that time and place, do the action. It will get easier with time. Like my example, at the beginning, I would forget wearing a face mask. But since I have done it for the last several months, now it's almost a second nature. I have it with me all the time. So it takes time. Research shows at least 10 weeks to make a habit or to change a habit. At least it takes 10 weeks. Next slide, please. Brittany.
Thanks, Kidani. Okay, so what I mentioned the acronym SMART goals earlier, and you're probably thinking, what does that acronym even stand for? It stands for being specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, in a timeline, and the R in smarter, reward, because that is so important to be rewarded as far as when we accomplish things. So what exactly do you want to accomplish? For example, I want to save money and eat healthier by bringing my lunch to work. How can you be measurable when setting a goal? How will you know that you reached your goal? What will you be able to do? For example, I will bring my lunch to work twice next week, and I will save at least $10 by not going out to lunch. How can you be obtainable? Is this something you're going to work to do in a week, or what does that look like as far as the time frame? Is it possible? Is it realistic? Can you achieve it? Is it reasonable? How do you know this? For example, you can bring leftovers or you can meal prep at home in order to have food, put it in the fridge or in your lunch pail, and you aren't going to be going out to lunch when you get hungry or when your stomach growls at work. As far as your timeline, when will you accomplish your goal? How long do you want to do this? Maybe you want to save a certain amount of money, or again, going back to that specific part of your goal and what you want to accomplish and what your deadline is. So again, I focused on the R in the word SMART, that reward. So it is really important to set a reward for yourself. So how are you going to celebrate achieving that goal? What are you going to do for yourself? I think it's really important to set this in order to be motivated. Next slide, please. So why make our goals SMART? Having a specific structure is going to really help us really achieve that, like I just said, and focusing more on what the acronym SMART really means. It looks at your personal vision, so what you're wanting to accomplish, like I stated in the previous slide, how you're going to know if you reached your goal, again, keeping yourself accountable, if it's realistic or not, and how long it's going to take you to reach that goal. That's why we set SMART goals and not just say, I'm going to lose weight, or I want to do something to improve my professional development for work. Being specific is so important if you want to accomplish something in life. Next slide, please. I briefly talked about motivation, and motivation is so important. So after you initially identify your priorities and recognize where your values are, it's important to look at what really motivates you, because ideally that R in the word smarter, how are we going to get there? What is going to motivate you to accomplish a goal that you set for yourself? And again, motivation isn't a one-size-fits-all. We are all motivated to do different things and internally and externally motivated to do things differently. So again, we're not all the same people. So it's important to recognize what gets you excited about accomplishing something. Next slide, please. So take a second to think about, what do you want to accomplish in 2021? Maybe it's something personally, maybe it's something professionally. If you want to take a second and grab a piece of paper and a pen, if you have something near you, and just jot down the idea to leave yourself accountable. Next slide, please. If you haven't had any time to really think about what you want to accomplish in 2021, I realize today is only the 5th day of the year. Ask yourself what life looks like right now. Where are you? Where do you spend your time? Who are you with? Where do you live? And what are your relationships like? A lot of smart, goal-driven things in life focus around these different questions. These are different areas of your life that you could potentially improve on. Next slide, please. So after you ask yourself those questions, thinking about where life is at now, again, I realize we are in the midst of a pandemic still, so 2020, 2021 looks a little bit different than it usually does at this point in time. So what do you want life to look like? Where do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to spend your time with? Where do you want to live? What do you want your relationships to be like? So again, looking into the future, this is going to potentially help you think about where you want to go and potentially help you set those SMART goals. How can your goal setting skills improve what your life will look like down the road, do you think? Next slide, please. Goals should be flexible. I think that's the most important thing to get out of today, is that you can change and alter your goals. Again, being realistic is so important, especially in the midst of a pandemic right now, because I want everybody, and all of my colleagues will agree, that we want you to be successful in reaching that SMART goal, but be realistic so you can alter it. If it's too easy, you can adjust it, and that's okay. You can adjust the goal. Don't adjust the goal, just adjust the action steps. So how can you change and how you're going to accomplish that goal? I strongly recommend making goals for different areas of your life, such as self-care, family and relationships, spiritual growth, finances, and personal development. Different areas of your life can flow together like an ecosystem, and they all need attention and care. Enjoy the journey and your personal definition of success. Keep your vision and your goals in front of you. Refer to them daily so you keep moving towards your personal vision. Next slide, please.
So as we start a new year from today's presentation, take the challenge. Set a short, intermediate, and long-term goals. A SMART goal. Next slide, please. Don't forget to reach for the stars. You can do it. Just adjust. Just take small steps. Celebrate small wins. We can't do everything just in one time. It takes time. It's a process. It's a journey. So celebrate small wins and continue, then it becomes more natural. Next slide, please. So these are some of our resources. and we will make sure to include it in the follow-up email. Thank you for joining us. We have a short survey that we will put in the link. Please take a few seconds to take that survey. It will help us to improve the programs that we do. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is a series for January. So we will have session 2 on hydration for health. So join us the same time, the same day next week. Now, please take a second to take the survey question for us. Thank you again.